Shadowverse.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and we've got someone new!
Hey guys.
Take a look at this guy!
This is Anthony.
Or Ant.
Ant.
Which one do you prefer?
Ant.
Ant?
Still
Ant?
mighty, still big.
Still big?
Ant-Man?
Yeah. No, not
Okay.
Ant-Man, just Ant.
Comments?
I do like Ant-Man.
Not Ant-Man.
I do like it though.
I actually kind of do too.
So, Ant is going to be joining us, right? And he's new to the whole medieval weapons stuff, but he's saying he knows a lot, so that's great. So we're going to be giving Ant his very first sword to get him started.
Thanks,
Check it
guys.
out.
Yeah, look, I know quite a bit about swords. I got cross guards and blood grooves and all that
What?
kind of
Hang on. What did you say?
stuff.
Back one.
What did you say?
Cross guards? Or
No,
blood
other
grooves?
one.
Blood grooves.
Blood grooves, yeah.
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 Yeah, you don't deserve this yet. All right, so we clearly have some things to go through, and then we'll see if you're worthy of this. So let's
again.
Yep, let's get started. Alrighty, Ant. So you are actually quite new to whole medieval stuff and swords and
Not
stuff.
going to act like I know everything when I definitely don't. So.
So there's actually a really good opportunity to address the most common sword misconceptions that do exist that you might have actually come across already. And so by sharing the correct information with you, we get to make this video for our audience as well. They can share it with people. And so the first one that's come up, look,
Okay.
Ant didn't actually know to call this a blood groove.
No, I didn't.
You didn't know anything to call it.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. I think I did call it a blood groove, but I don't really know.
You don't know?
To be honest.
Well,
No.
that's a surprisingly common one. It's appeared in video games and stuff like that, where they call this channel right here a blood groove.
Right.
Now, sometimes they call it that descriptively without knowing the proper name, but even when they know the proper name, they still think it's made to channel blood when attacking. So the actual name of this groove here is called a fuller.
A what?
A fuller.
A fuller?
A fuller.
Fuller?
Yeah, fuller.
Fuller?
Fuller.
Fuller.
Not
Okay.
fillet, fuller.
Okay.
What's your impression of that, mate? Does it make sense?
I'm guessing so. They've named it that because it fills with blood, yeah?
No.
No, oh, okay.
So it's actually a structural thing where having a channel like this reduces a surprising amount of weight from the blade. Doesn't kind of look like it, right? But I've modeled this in 3D on like a double fuller with a sword. Now granted, my one goes all the way down the blade, but it removed a third of the weight of the blade itself. So I can reduce a shocking amount of weight without lowering too much of its structure.
Yep.
The other thing is, fullers don't funnel any blood in any beneficial way. Like to say it's a blood groove, to some people say it opens up an air pocket as you stab into your opponent, which that's
To glide further?
Yeah, it's nonsense. And that it somehow is beneficial that when you take it out, the blood will drain easier off the blade. That's also nonsense. We've actually done a video recently seeing how much blood sticks to a blade if you can flick it off.
Okay.
It sticks to a blade a lot.
Right.
All right. And the fullers do nothing to help out in that regard, at least.
Okay.
So here's the thing, right? People often get another misconception when it comes to fullers where they think it will not reduce any of the structure at all. That's false. Like the fact that you're removing surface area. So just like, have you seen an I-beam?
Yes.
Yeah, I-beams,
Yep.
that's common, right?
Yep.
Do you notice how on the top and bottom they have these flat surfaces?
Yep, that's it.
By adding more kind of structure to the furthest points away from the flexing point, that makes it resist, that type of structure, right?
That's right, yeah.
And people have sometimes identified a fuller as an I-beam. The problem is, it's not.
Right.
Like a fuller is more like an I-beam that's turned on its side, where it has these channels on either end. And so an I-beam is literally weaker when it's turned on its side versus when it's lying flat. The thing is though, there is still structure in the I-beam because it has those two sides, even if it was pushed on its side. And so the thing that is retaining a lot of the structure in a fuller are the ridges on either end. See? And so that keeps a good amount of structure, even though you are losing some by adding the fuller. The give and take is that you reduce the weight to an even greater degree with only a small loss of structure, which adds, overall a pretty light sword in comparison, while keeping most of its, strength and structure there.
It's good that they reduce the weight because they're so heavy.
What did you say?
It's good they reduce the weight because they're so heavy, swords.
Actually.
Did I hear you say that swords are heavy? Medieval swords are heavy?
Yeah, I did.
Like this, give this one a go. That's pretty heavy, right?
That is.
Yeah, that's not a sword, actually.
Okay.
It looks like a sword. It's a sword-like object, but it's not actually a sword.
Okay.
This is what you buy off eBay for 20 bucks to hang on your wall.
Wow, so I can have one of these for 20 bucks?
No, you don't want one of these.
Okay, hang on. That was not 20 bucks when I bought it, okay? Swords were very rare when I bought it.
20 bucks.
I don't want to say how much I paid for it now.
Try something like this. Now, this is actually a properly medieval, this is a proper sword. This one costs a pretty penny. Does that feel heavy?
That does not feel that heavy at all.
Well, a sword is a tool, just like any other thing. They can come in all different shapes and sizes, lengths. So saying a medieval sword is heavy doesn't really make any sense, because they can, look, this one's a long sword. It's quite long, but it's also very nimble. The blade has a beautiful cross section and it's not too heavy. But there's also some caveats to that as well, because some swords can be heavy. For example, this one here. This one is about 1.7 kilos or something. It's on the heavier end of the swords we have. Give that one a go.
Yep.
Now, this sword here, how does that one feel?
Quite short.
Does it feel heavy?
And not too heavy, but quite solid. The end of it feels...
So the pommel at the end of the sword is your counterbalance. Now, something to talk about when it comes to the weight of a sword is actually where the weight is distributed.
Yep.
For example, this is relatively speaking, a thinner blade with a larger pommel and handle construction.
So that's a pommel?
Yeah, that's
like
a pommel.
Pomeranian?
Sure.
Okay.
So when it comes to a sword like this, for example, well, this one doesn't feel that heavy, but if you put this on some scales, it's actually going to be kind of heavy.
Right.
However, if you grab something like this, there's a katana. We all love katanas.
Okay. All right.
Give that one a draw. How does that one feel? Does that one feel heavier?
It actually does.
Now, the reason that one feels heavier is because all of the mass of the blade is up here, whereas this one is down here in the counterbalance.
Right. Okay.
So medieval swords aren't particularly heavy. You can get bigger swords that are heavier than others, but it's just like anything else.
Wow.
Saying they're all as a blanket statement, heavy, isn't really accurate. Now, the small little caveat to add there is that this feels heavier because where the weight is distributed, but it's actually, it weighs less. If we put that on scales, it weighs less than this one.
Less than that?
Yeah, it's just here, hold them together. It's just where the weight is balanced.
Wow, okay. I understand where you're coming from. I'm starting to actually get my head around some swords now. So they're not very heavy, and they're also not very sharp, like katanas?
Well, actually...
All right, Ant, who told you medieval swords are not sharp? Ant, look, no, don't hold back. Who told you? This crap has been around for years.
Yeah.
Ant, spit it out. Who told you?
All right, I had a guy, he came up to me, and he was trying to sell me a katana.
Freaking, of course. All right. So, let's address that. Okay? The whole sharpness thing is mostly nonsense, okay?
Yes, why would I have a sword that can't cut anything when the whole primary purpose of it is to cut?
And
Does it look cool?
Okay. Do you know you can sharpen like iron as sharp as like a razor blade? Because the idea, especially the katana thing, is that a katana has a harder edge, and the assumption then is that they can be sharper, that's false. A harder edge can hold its edge longer, but it can't inherently be sharper than other good quality steel. The problem is when you have such a hard edge, it actually becomes brittle and they chip pretty easily. Okay, so there's that.
Also, your edge geometry plays a very large part on how well your sword is going to cut. And katanas are very good at that.
They have a great edge geometry. There's that. But medieval swords, right? Not only can they be sharp and really, really sharp, we have archaeological finds from battlefields of people having their entire heads cut in two from bladed objects, right?
No
like
way.
serious stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking about some of the most devastating wounds from swords, right? That alone flatly says that they were really sharp to do that level of damage. Yeah. But we also have archaeological swords, right? Some of them still have edges on them. Yeah, still sharp, right?
From back then.
Still
sharp. Could
so
use it now.
Why don't you take one of our sharp swords?
This is sharp.
And do some cuts.
Let's see how sharp you find the sword.
All right.
And this, you haven't done many sword cutting before as well.
I know lots about swords, man. I've done heaps.
Okay.
No, not really. So
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. I believe in you. So before we continue addressing some of these big misconceptions, you will have noticed that we've got Ant here. We've already introduced you. Say hi again, Ant.
Hey guys.
Now,
thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, mate.
Yeah,
so Ant's going to be joining us in a couple of videos going forward into the future, and we're addressing these misconceptions, but you might be wondering, who is this guy, and other things.
I'm curious to learn more about swords, but the other thing is too, I've got hair.
You do have hair.
Huh.
Some of us have been follically challenged in the past.
Yes, that is true.
But there was nothing against him. We loved it.
Very aerodynamic.
It was very aerodynamic.
Lots of glare though.
Yes.
Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So with Ed helping us, by the way, Nate will probably come back. You know, we're going to see him occasionally in the future, of course. But with Ed here, you will get to know him, and we're going to be doing an exclusive video, just chatting with him, give you the opportunity to learn more about him, who he is, what we'll be doing. And so if you want to see that exclusive video, all you need to do is become one of our supporters on channel memberships, Patreon, Subscribe Star, or Player, and you get access to not only that video, a whole heap of exclusive videos going back ages now.
Yeah.
Heaps of great exclusive content. Thank you to everyone who's supporting us, especially recently. There's been an outwell of support that is just, guys, you're lifesavers. You're legends. Thank you. We appreciate you. You help us keep the lights on. And so let's get that exclusive video for you. And let's get back to addressing some of these myths. I think there's a couple of things you need to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so green, man. This thing's really sharp. That was amazing. That was incredible. I think I want to go on crusade. I want to go and fight. I want to use this sword. I want to get people.
I think it's going to do fine.
I think you'll fit right in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yes, as Ant was able to demonstrate, swords are sharp. So you got to experience a sharp medieval sword.
Yeah, pretty good. But
Pretty good?
I think katanas, they're sharper, aren't they? Because they've got one really sharp edge that'll cut through anything.
Only katanas have one edge.
Only katanas.
Only katanas.
Oh. Actually.
So, Ant,
Yes, Shad.
what are you holding there?
Looks like a machete to me. Go through the jungle and...
That's another misconception we'll have to address. Thing is though, in Ant's defense, this sword used to be an actual machete.
Yes.
It's just added, not a very typical machete blade
Right.
that suited a sword quite well. It has a distal taper and it's really well balanced and good steel. And so we rehoosted it as close to a falchion, but there are distinct differences between this and a real historical falchion. But the takeaway is like, look at what we're holding here.
Okay.
What do you see in commonality between these swords?
Well, that is also a single-bladed sword.
Yes, single-edged.
Single edge.
Yes.
Single edge.
Single-edged.
Well, they all are, because there are swords, for example, this one here, a Kriegsmesser. This is from Germany, and it means what, war knife?
War knife.
Yeah.
It's a big knife.
It's a big knife.
That's a big knife.
It's a very big knife. So, funny thing is, right, if you took this exact same blade and gave it the handle that has, definitionally, it would be a different sword,
Right.
which is a bit odd.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And it'll be called a falchion.
Yes, but falchions are a very broad category. We should
Falchion basically means single-edged sword with the hilt construction of a sword handle. So what you're holding there is also a falchion.
Falchion.
Yeah, and they had a lot of different blade profiles. In actual fact, single-edged medieval swords were surprisingly common in certain areas and times.
Right.
Yeah, especially Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why did Germany only have, or why was that?
Well, they
common
didn't
in
only
Germany?
have it, they had lots of different types of swords.
Okay.
But the exact same preferences that would make you want to prefer a single-edged sword in the modern day versus double-edged,
Right.
same thing that happened historically, right?
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to the blade profiles, to the way that they are used, to make you preference one or the other. And as a result, it's not just an Asian thing. There were
Yep.
single-edged European swords as well.
Right.
So the katana isn't alone.
Yes.
And something like this actually has a lot of the same similarities that a katana will have, so a lot of the same benefits,
Right.
with maybe some even more that are added.
There are a couple of differences like this would have over a katana. Some of those similarities though, it has a edge geometry that takes advantage of certain things that the katana does as well. And what it is, the length of the edge bevel. Do you see how wide this edge bevel is? It starts here, and because there's only one edge, you can take up most of the space of the blade width with a single edge bevel, where if this was double bladed, the edge bevel would need to be much thinner.
Yep.
Having a wider edge bevel like that means the angle of the edge can be more narrow, which assists for cutting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an
So it can cut a lot quicker and faster?
No,
or-
no.
Oh.
That comes down to the swordsman.
That's the
right.
swordsman.
Now, there is something a little bit different about a katana versus something like Kriegsmesser, and that is, well, the differential hardening. That is something that is mostly on katanas.
Yeah, that's because the katana steel is better, isn't it?
You can take this one.
Actually. So, Ant, steel quality of the swords is very misunderstood.
Okay.
Because here is the reality. Most historical swords were not made out of great steel. They were limited by the technology at the time, and so historical steels are never going to be as good as modern steels.
Right.
Even with, we can spit it out pretty fast. We've got technology and automated processes. We can get this melting much higher temperature to remove nearly all the impurities in it at all. And so when people compare steel quality, and the most common ones is European versus Asian or Japanese, but there's also Damascus steel, I think, called Woots. So when they find these more exceptional swords that are made out of pretty good steel, they apply it too broadly. And they think all Japanese swords, all Middle Eastern swords, and it even kind of happens with Europe.
Yep.
There's a sword called the Ulfbert swords.
Right.
And they're Viking swords. Ulfbert. You're learning a lot here.
Yeah, oh, mate, my brain is going to explode.
Or melt.
Or melt, either one.
Yeah. But those swords were really high quality. In fact, they were so free of impurities that they were close to modern steel in quality. Close,
Okay.
not exactly.
Yep.
The mistake for all of these, right, is to apply them too broadly and think all Viking swords were incredible steel, or Japanese swords incredible steel. No, it wasn't the case. Most swords historically were adequate. There were cheap ones, there were good ones. You can compare some of the best to the best, and there is some nuance and preferences I have when you compare the best, because what we find with European swords, some of the best, they were made out of spring steel.
Right. Okay.
You know what spring steel is?
Not exactly.
Not exactly?
No.
Let me show you. Do you see the sword?
Yes.
All right. Have a look at this.
Right.
That is spring steel. Now,
That is bendy.
that is bendy. Some people claim that you can't do this with medieval swords even if they had a spring temper. That's
Okay.
false. Of course, the tolerances and stresses are higher on modern swords, but we have art, medieval art, people just flexing medieval swords like this,
Okay.
showing that it has a spring temper on it. And so that is really good quality.
Unreal. Okay.
Now-
Never knew anything about all this.
It's pretty good, pretty good. There are some claims that Japan had some spring steel katanas. I have not seen any surviving examples. If people have any to share, I would love to see them. Actual surviving examples that still have a spring temper on them. At the moment, the most high quality Japanese swords that are surviving have a differential harden on them, which is its own discussion. It's too big of a topic to go into now. But the takeaway really is that most swords from most cultures, when they really tried to engineer the best quality, had pretty comparable quality in swords in terms of the best quality.
Right.
And some of the best steel that you can get for a sword is spring steel.
Yep.
And we do have surviving medieval swords that are in museums that have a spring temper. You can do that with them. And these are
Wow.
these are 500-year-old swords, 600-year-old swords.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Pretty cool.
So even from back in those days, they could develop that kind of technology, which
Yeah.
blows my mind.
You're getting into it.
All right, so the steel quality is pretty good.
Yep.
But only if they had a martial arts system to go along with it would be the way to go. You know, bit of wah!
Actually. So this one is actually a big misconception.
Okay.
Yeah, there is this thought or perceived idea that martial arts, especially because it was popularized in film and Hollywood and stuff, that these codified martial arts came from Asia only, and that Europe didn't have any of them.
Right.
And so Europe actually did have very strict, codified, structured martial arts systems.
Okay.
And they came from masters who would teach it and even write treatises describing it. And a lot of these treatises have been kind of brought back and taught in a practice called HEMA, which stands for Historical European Martial Arts. And their focus is studying the treatise. But then there are a lot of other people that just love swords, swing them around, and they start to figure out there are techniques, structures, that work really well with these weapons.
I've definitely learned that today.
You've learned a couple,
I
haven't
have
you?
learned that.
In fact, I'm going to get you to show a couple in
Okay.
a second, not right away.
Okay,
Because
all right.
there's another interesting point to raise about this perception of European martial arts. And one is the idea that unarmed martial arts seems to be absent from European sources. That's false. There are actually unarmed martial art, systems that come from medieval Europe, but they are not as common or were not used as prevalently as the unarmed martial arts that seem to arise from Asia. And do you want to guess why? So all right,
Well-
let's start this off. If you were going into a fight, right?
Yep.
And you had the option to fight unarmed or to fight with a weapon, what would you pick?
Definitely with a weapon.
Okay, so if you're in a culture environment where weapons were highly restricted, there's a need then to develop martial arts systems that are more unarmed or use farming implements.
Definitely, there would be a need.
Yeah, there would be a need.
You'd have to.
Do you know it's very interesting that a lot of the classic Asian martial art weapons come from farming implements?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you can use your rake?
Well, there might be a rake somewhere in there, but like the kama,
Yep.
okay, that's a farming implement. The bow staff, okay, not necessarily, but it's a more peasant weapon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also things like sais and tonfas and everything, a lot of these have farming origins. There are some medieval weapons that have farming origins. The thing is though, the practice of carrying weapons for self-defense, beginning at the dagger all the way up to the sword, was vastly more prevalent in Europe. People were more free to own and use weapons in Europe than they were in Asia.
Oh, right.
And so a lot of the martial arts that were developed around in Europe were around weapons.
Right,
Weapon-based martial arts, and we get a lot of them. We got sword-based martial arts, halberd martial arts, spear martial arts, and there's a whole heap of. In fact, you've got to learn a couple of simple techniques that come from those martial origins, haven't you?
Yeah, today, yeah.
Do you want to show off one of them?
Oh.
Yeah, I was showing you a drill before, and
let's
it's
see.
an unintuitive but really interesting thing where we will forward and you strike with the back edge. See what you did then? Right then. That's
Yeah,
it. You
okay.
did it perfectly.
All right, so
coming up and strike with the back edge. Look at that. Look at that. You're already learning it.
there we go.
And so that technique right there has a lot of value, but you might have come up with it on your own, training on yourself, but that would have been after months or years,
That's right.
right? Being taught these techniques right out of the gate gives you such a huge advantage and leap forward, and it has such martial validity. Like some of the things that you've already learned, right, about keeping your arms raised in a strike like this, and then presenting the cross guard and how this is blocking a lot of your body now, right, is vastly more advanced than the basic kind of things people, I'm going to attack with a sword, right?
Me earlier on today.
Yeah. So, do you want to have a go and hit Boromir with that technique?
This one?
Yeah.
All right, so where are we?
Look at that. You're doing well, doing well. So I would throw a bit more muscle into that first strike, like
right.
and go and hit him hard. Oh, dude, that was gorgeous.
Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
That was beautiful. And so this is like just a basic drill that I still practice, right? Because it conditions some really important martial things. And this type of drill comes directly from historical sources, right? And so I will be there and I will drill and I'll start there and I'll drill this motion. And this just trains a reflex, okay? A conditioning reflex muscle memory. When you're striking, the back edge is easy there to be utilized, and it also teaches me to keep my arms elevated because there is more defensive value in keeping your arms elevated in most situations. There are times when you want to do a low guard, right? But in a lot of striking, your arms
You're up high?
raise high, okay?
Okay. Well, I think what I've learned out of this is where a double-edged sword is actually quite good. So I might actually start getting my head away from the katana.
Oh, look at that.
Hey?
Look at that.
I think you're getting me.
I'm getting you.
To understand there, Shad.
It's been heaps of fun going through these things, but these are the common misconceptions people have about medieval swords, and we were able to hit some of the biggest ones. Introducing Anthony to the channel. It's good to have you here, mate.
No worries, thanks for having me.
There are a whole heap of other misconceptions about medieval weapons and culture and stuff, and here's a real... You might not have even seen this one. This is before your time, but we have a video debunking classic myths about medieval armor.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, guys, it's right there. You can click on it. Check it out right now. You might want to check it out too.
I might have to, actually.
Check it.
When I get home tonight, I'll get on it.
It's right there. Have fun.